afternoon. Thank you for joining us. My name is Karen Cotton, and welcome to the Research and Innovation Training Institute's Grant Writing Workshop. Today we have Dr. Shonda Green, who's going to introduce our trainers for the day. Dr. Green.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. This is actually our last session for the semester, and we are closing out with a couple of guests who I'm very, very excited about. I get to work with them quite often, and they are just phenomenal. And so they have some great, rich information to share with faculty. So I am going to introduce both of them. First, we have Dr. STELLA Smith. She serves as an assistant professor in the Department of Educational Leadership and Counseling and is the associate director for the Minority Achievement, Creativity, and High Ability, the MACH 3 Center here at PVAMU. A qualitative researcher, Dr. STELLA L. Smith's scholarly interests focus on experiences of faculty and administrators of color in higher education, African-American females in leadership in higher education, access and inclusion of underserved populations in higher education, and P20 educational pipeline alignment. Dr. Smith is a strong advocate for social justice and passionate about creating asset-based pathways of success for underserved students. Dr. Smith was recognized with a 2014 dissertation award from the American Association of Blacks in Higher Education, and as part of the 2019 class of 35 outstanding women leaders in higher education by diverse issues in higher education. Dr. Smith serves as the managing editor for the Journal of Minority Achievement, Creativity, and Leadership, and an associate editor of the Journal of Family Strength. Dr. Smith earned her PhD in Educational Administration with a portfolio in Women and Gender Studies, and BS in Microbiology from the University of Texas at Austin, and an MA in Organizational Management from the University of Phoenix. Additionally, we have Dr. LEALON Martin. LEALON Martin is an associate dean, he's the interim associate dean of the Roy G. Perry College of Engineering and faculty in the Chemical Engineering Department here at PVAMU. He received his BS degree in chemical engineering from Tuskegee University and earned a PhD in chemical engineering from UCLA in the area of process systems engineering. Prior to joining PV, LEALON served on the faculty of Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in Troy, New York, with joint appointments in the Eiserman Department of Chemical and Biological Engineering and the Department of Decision Science and Engineering Systems, and on the faculty at the University of Texas at Austin in the Makeda Department of Chemical Engineering. LEALON is also a licensed attorney and a member of the State Bar of Texas. He received his JD from the Texas School of Law at the University of Texas at Austin. Upon completing law school, LEALON joined Fish and Richardson PC as an associate in the firm's patent litigation group. In addition to his administrative and teaching duties, LEALON is Emeritus Managing Principal at LaCourte Martin PC, a Texas law firm that specializes in science and technology law with practice areas in intellectual property law, immigration law, and cybersecurity data privacy. Dr. Smith and Dr. Martin also are fierce advocates for students. They are passionate researchers, and they have both been a part of federal review panels. And so they are here to talk with us. We invited them to talk with everyone about their experience on federal review panels, about what they've learned in terms of their grant processes, and just anything else the discussion may end up leading to regarding anything related to funding and faculty. And so for our very last session, I am thrilled to introduce Dr. Smith and Dr. Martin.
Thank you, Shonda.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Green. So I'm excited to have the opportunity to co-present with Dr. Martin on this important, very important session. What I found, and then we'll get into the presentation, that so many times on these panels, and you can interject whenever you like, Dr. Martin, it is so critical to have someone that has our positionality to sometimes explain and to sometimes counter some of these ideas around who is worthy of receiving grant funding and whose applications are valid in these spaces. So this particular topic is very dear to my heart.
Dr. Smith, if I could just add, now that we're an R2 institution and our research footprint is going to expand, it's also important for us to engage in proposal writing and solicitation of funds, funding those activities. And this really is a very good first step to understanding that process. To know how to write a good proposal, you first need to see what a good proposal looks like. And there's no better way of seeing what that looks like than participating in the review process.
Absolutely. And so I would say that we both want to thank Karen Cotton and Dr. Green for the opportunity to give this presentation. So thank you for creating a platform that allows us to share innovation throughout this. And so we have an opening question here to gauge the audience. So who, I guess we could use the chat to answer this question. So have you, who in the audience has already reviewed grants for federal funding, either NSF, that probably should say DOE, any of those things? And if you have, what's one word that you'd use to describe it? So those of you in the audience, let's see if I can get my chat to open here. Has anyone reviewed so far? So it sounds like, well, someone has done a mock review. And Dr. Ashley, how did that go? What was your thought about it?
It was a very interesting experience. I did not have any idea of all the things that were involved in it. We worked as a group, and I found the group work experience was very rewarding. I learned a lot, even though it wasn't a real review, but it sort of put everything in perspective. So it was very instructional, let me say it that way.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Welcome.
So Dr. Ashley, quick question. So where was the mock review? Can you tell us a little bit about the mock review?
It was with the NSF and the Biological Sciences division. So it's not really a division that I would normally think of, but I just wanted to learn what the process was about. So,
and how long ago was it?
It was last summer.
Oh, last summer. Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm. And how did you become involved in it, Dr. Ashley?
I actually listened to a few webinars previously and signed up for email alerts. It showed up in my inbox one day and just decided to try.
Fantastic. Thank you. So stepping out and just trying it out. That's wonderful. Has anyone else? Okay. Well, we'll move forward, but you can see that from Dr. Ashley's example, how rewarding it was even to be part of a mock simulated trial of it. So, and the information that you can learn from that. So what further information could you learn when you're on a panel people are really showing their preference, I think, as they are advocating for the different grant programs that are on display there and are in contention for funding. Just a second, advancing slide. So the objectives of the presentation is, one, to understand why we need to be at the table, provide an overview of the process to be selected, talk about some pros and cons for serving, and then tips for submitting grants based on some experiences that I've had and also experiences that Dr. Martin has had as well, which are also extensive. So why we need to be at the table. I have found on the panels that I've served on, there have often not been African-American faculty that have been on those panels. They're often the institutions that are applying for some of those grants are often not HBCUs. So when the panels, those groups are talking about who is competitive and who's not competitive, they often don't have the context that is necessary to understand some of the constraints that HBCUs might have in these processes. They also don't understand the different constraints that faculty might have that work at HBCUs, and how the infusion of funds from some of these grants are just game changers for many of these institutions. Being at the table also helps us, as Dr. Martin said, understanding what really needs to be in a grant and the technical pieces related to that. We also need to make sure that HBCUs are provided equitable opportunities. I've been on panels where people have openly said that because it was an HBCU, they questioned the financial stability of the institution, or they questioned how money would be managed, or how the grant would be, carried out. So to have a voice there to really counter that. And also, and this is what Dr. Martin said, to have valuable information and knowledge for future grant applications.
And Dr. Smith, just to add to that, so you really, that last bullet point is very, very important, because sometimes, you know, in writing proposals, submitting, responding to solicitations, it's a very stressful activity. I mean, you're basically putting your brain out there and letting people who you've never met criticize you in ways that you would otherwise find unacceptable, right? And so serving on a review panel, it also gives you the opportunity to get into the system, to get into that mode of understanding intellectual critique and not taking it personal and being comfortable with it, to the extent that because if you're not a part of the process, it's going to be that much harder to be able to get funding. And you know, it's at NSF, for example, it's less than 8% success rate. So this is an opportunity to not only increase your chances of writing a successful proposal, but also getting yourself in the frame of mind in order to do it by having the experience of serving as a reviewer.
Absolutely. And I think particularly grants that you might write for later, because the buzzwords, you learn what are the buzzwords, what are the things that people are really looking at. You know, something that might seem minor to us as we're writing is something that was critical in that review meeting that meant the difference between you being competitive and on the line and getting those funds. So having that experience will help you know better. You know, I have 15 pages, I got 20 pages. What is it that really is going to stand out for these reviewers in order to get to bring this money to my campus? So the overview of the process to be selected. So one, I think as Dr. Ashley mentioned when she was talking about her example, you volunteer to be a reviewer. So there are spaces where you can either email the different areas in order to be considered as a reviewer. I often try to make sure that I'm members of those listservs, and I go on the websites often to know when they're doing their calls for reviewers. And those applications could it's like an application, it talks about your experience. You might submit a CV, but you need to get in front of these reviewers. One thing is though, once you've reviewed once or twice, you're kind of in their radar. So oftentimes they might come and they might solicit you. They might say, we have some spaces. You know, once you start to develop a relationship with those different organizations. There's normally some kind of orientation session where they talk about what the requirements are, and that's generally required, but sometimes you can tell them it doesn't work for you and get that information separate. You'll receive notification that you're selected and talk about the time commitment. And I've seen this two ways. I've seen where they send you some information about your grant proposals, or you have to go into some kind of secured system in order to download that information. The ones that I'm familiar with are Fastlane or G5. I don't know if you've seen some others, Dr. Martin. And then you have a time frame to prepare for the meeting. So this prepare for meeting time is really, really, really important, because once it's go for these panels, it just keeps going. And so I know the first time I did reviews, I didn't use my prepare for meeting time well, and that created a very stressful membership on a panel time, because I had so much work to do in order to make sure that I was giving a good review for these panels, an honest and informed review. Your thoughts, Dr. Martin?
No, this is spot on. It's spot on. And I guess in addition, we should also say that for these reviews, you actually get paid. So I mean, so you get,
Yeah. Oh, I forgot the money part. We should have
that much money. Not that much money,
Yes.
but it's a little bit. You do get paid for your time. So so that's another part of the process. Giving them your information so that they can pay you.
And I have only reviewed during COVID, but the urban legend is that people actually used to travel to do these panels. So sometimes it's the payment is also, it's a cash payment, but sometimes you also get an opportunity to travel to do them. I don't know if after we figure out what the new normal is after COVID, if that will be the case or if they'll go to all online, but that was some of the benefit and the perk.
Yes. So prior to COVID, I only participated in reviews that were on site at either at NSF or at NIH. So there's always travel. It's easier if you're already on the East Coast. So when I was in New York, it was easy for me to fly down or even take the train down. But they expanded it to say, we shouldn't bias travel to the East Coast. So, so now everywhere you would go. But now, again, since COVID, everything's been virtual. It's going to be interesting to see what they do moving forward. There is something to be said for the in-person panel review because there's so many little subtleties and nuances that you get face-to-face in person that you don't really get virtually. So it'll be interesting what they do moving forward.
Absolutely. I would love to be part of an in-person. I think that there'd be something very special about that. So expansion of the prepare for the meeting bullet. So read the grant solicitation. Please read the grant solicitation. This is really, really, really important because in the meetings, when you are defending the grant that you feel like has the merit to get the funding, where people will come in is really based on what it was in the grant solicitation. Doesn't matter how good the grant is, if it doesn't speak to the solicitation, that's where the points are coming from. So you really need to understand what the grant is about. Is it a grant that talks about institutions that are testing out an idea? Does the idea have to be fully proven? What is the focus of the grant? You need to know that in order to be able to evaluate them in a way that makes sense and can be justified when you're in the meeting. Become familiar with all parts of the grant. So people, as grant writers, we know we put things in places where it can fit. So if it doesn't fit in the 20 pages of the narrative, then there might be something that popped in the budget part. There might be something that's in other pieces. So you need to understand all of the mechanics of that particular grant so that you can know where different information is. And one example of this, so NSF is very specific about where they put their stuff. DOE is not. So if you can put stuff different places. So when I did reviews for DOE, some of the information that I assumed was in places where it is in NSF, it wasn't there. And so you have to look in different areas of the grant to know, to get all of the information that you need to do a good review. Ensure you don't have any conflicts of interest. As researchers and scholars in these fields, we might know somebody who is part of a grant that has been submitted. If that's the case, you have to let them know because you shouldn't review a grant where you have any kind of knowledge of the people on it or you have any kind of interest within that grant. Read your assigned grants. Most of the time, you don't have to read every single grant. You'll have assigned grants and you'll have a role on that grant. And so based on that, you'll know which ones you need to read first and more thoroughly, and which ones you might not have to read as thoroughly or don't have to be as familiar with. You provide a written assessment of those grants based on what you have read and the regulations and the key points that they're asking you to review them from. And then what I also did was prepare talking points about the different grants that I did. And it was very similar to my written assessment, but I wanted to have some quick key points to get out there about the grants that I thought were definitely competitive, and also the grants that I thought weren't competitive. Why did I think that that was the case? So that I could be part of the conversation around the scoring for those particular grants, and have clear examples of why I thought what I thought.
And you know, Dr. Smith, that's really an important point. The last bullet, again, your last bullets are just spot on. So when you go into when you review your set of proposals, typically, for example, with NSF, you'll be assigned a group of proposals, and some of those proposals you'll be asked to lead the discussion. So it's very critical that you have those talking points prepared so that you can lead the discussion on the proposals that you've been assigned to, number one. And then if there's a proposal that you're reviewing that you really feel strongly or passionately about, one way or the other, either for or against, it's always good to have those talking points prepared so that you can either defend or condemn a proposal based on your review. And that's going to be very important also, because there's a certain psychology that goes into this. And so if you're prepared and you have your talking points prepared and you've read the proposal, you've gone through and you've found you found some fruit that's not necessarily low hanging, you found something that's buried in there, that gives you more credence as a reviewer, not only to the program officer, who may then invite you to future reviews if you do a good job and you're really articulate and you really are doing a good job as a reviewer of proposals, but also with your peers and your colleagues. It's also a networking opportunity. So if you are meticulous and you provide certain care in how you review proposals, then a person sitting there may see you as a good collaborator and say, well, if this person is this meticulous in reviewing proposals, then maybe I can collaborate with this person on the team and they'll be that meticulous in writing a proposal. So I've actually found collaborators at these reviews as well. So you want to think about the proposal review process. Yes, you're providing a service, and it's a valuable service, but it's also something that can help you propel your career in a very non-intuitive way, just by making connections with program officers, making connection with potential collaborators. And the way the proposal review panel is structured, it gives you a lot of opportunity to do that. So you can go to dinner with your fellow reviewers. So there's a lot of opportunity for you to use the proposal review process as a way to propel your career.
Absolutely. So the next one, going into participating in the grant proposal meeting. So prepare those talking points, as Dr. Martin said. Each meeting might be held differently, so you need to know how that meeting is going to be conducted. Some meetings we met only to talk about the proposals. So we did all of our individual work on our own. And then I've been on other meetings where part of the day was us just being on Zoom working through proposals. So you need to understand what the meeting is, how the meeting is going to be conducted, and what the goals of that is. And know that it's okay to share different opinions, and that your perspective is important. So I think that some people that review proposals have very strong opinions about what is research, what is not research, how it should work. And so I think sometimes people can have an imposter syndrome around, why am I reviewing this research? I had some that were extremely technical, but the reason why they picked me for the panel is because the education piece of it. They wanted to understand, like, how is that working? How would that be valuable? And so each of us they were bringing this technical knowledge that I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, but I do understand how this particular education piece works, and this one is written well and this one is not. And so having a confidence around, once you've done your homework, right? You've read the solicitation, you know what the grants are about, you spent time writing out your notes, you've got your talking points, you're ready, and being very confident about your opinions about that particular grant or that particular project, and why it is written well and why it is not written well. These interactions with folks aren't personal. They are about which one of these particular projects is the one that can really make a difference in the field. That's how I like to think about which one is going to advance the literature, which one is going to help us serve our students better in the future. And so being very being okay with having a different opinion as someone else and sharing that opinion for others to consider. Dr. Martin?
Yeah, so I guess the only thing I would say there just to add, just keep in mind that you can't underestimate the self-serving aspect of reviewing proposals, right? So if you think about it from let's say there's a proposal and the solicitation is on theoretical particle physics, right? I don't know anything about theoretical particle physics, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I won't be a reviewer on a panel for proposals in theoretical particle physics, because they want that diversity of thought, diversity of ideas. And we all are very intelligent. We all have PhDs, or we're all very qualified. So our brains work. And really that's all you need in order to be a proposal reviewer. So, but if you're someone who's steeped in you're the best theoretical particle physicist in the world, when you're writing your proposal, you have to keep me in mind. So you can't go so deep into the weeds that I can't even understand it when I review it, because there's so the only way you really fully understand what I'm saying is if you're sitting on the panel and you're sitting around the table and you have folks, different backgrounds, different technical expertise, pointing out different things about the proposal, things they like, things they don't like. And they're not all experts on that narrow little area in the proposal. So as you're writing the proposal, as you're thinking about it, and this is how I think about proposals now, I think about, well, who could possibly be sitting on this panel? And one way to figure that out, read the solicitation. If there's an education component there, it doesn't matter how technical it is, they're going to bring in someone from education. So you have to make sure that you converse in that proposal in a way that's going to allow Dr. Smith to go in and say, oh, this is great, because they're looking at mixed methods of quantity, these sorts of things, right? And so you want to use the review process to almost like reconnaissance, to sort of understand the anatomy of the panel so that you know how to write to the panel.
That's a great point. That one that had all that technical jargon, I think it was probably the best one from the science perspective, but it was the most lowly rated because nobody understood it. But the person who was like staunch in the field, and so we couldn't, it was difficult to figure out, okay, how is this going to actually advance, because it's so pigeonholed. So that's a great point. Spot on. So what are the pros and cons of surveying? And Dr. Martin, you might have some other cons. This was the only one that I could think of when I did this. But the ability to learn the review process, providing diverse perspectives, the monetary benefit, developing a relationship with a grant funder, and it's a CV builder, absolutely. And the cons, if you considered it a con, was a time commitment. So you do lock in a time that you're working on the grant, whether it is in the pre-time or it's actually during the grant process itself. But again, you're getting some monetary benefit for that. You're also learning so much about the grant review process. And if this is a grant that you are considering putting in the future, now you're not supposed to keep the grants. So that's the rule, that you don't keep copies of the grants. But at least you see how these grants are structured, and they can help you not fall into some pit holes that you might have otherwise by not having had that experience. Dr. Martin?
Yeah, so Dr. Smith, the only thing I would only add 2 points. The first point with respect to pros, I would add that it's an opportunity to find new collaborators.
Okay.
Because the members of your panel, you're building a network, and either they may become a future collaborator, or they may be able to link you up with, yeah, I know someone who does this. You guys will be great together. So there's an opportunity to do networking. So that's a pro. And then the other thing I would change is I don't think time commitment is a con. I don't think there are any cons because the amount of time that you're spending reviewing those proposals, thinking about if you're doing it right, thinking about what kind of review to submit, to upload, and if you're thinking about your talking points, all that takes time, yes, but it's really an investment, because you're investing, you're using that to invest in proposals that you will write in the future that you hope will be funded. So that time commitment, I think, is almost essential, and it will actually cut back on the time that you spend spinning your wheels trying to write a competitive proposal.
Absolutely. I agree. So I think these are yours to lead, Dr. Martin.
Oh, well,
Video.
all right, and right, of course, I'm on campus, but right at that moment, it says connection unstable. So we'll see how it goes. See, yes, next slide, please.
Okay. Do you see NSF proposal review? Dr. Martin? Can anybody hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
You can hear me.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is just move forward with the slides until Dr. Martin can get back in. These are his slides that he prepared, but I can do this. So for NSF proposal reviews, there are two criteria that must be met. So intellectual merit and broader impacts. And you always have to talk about these two. And I think, and looking at the people that are on the call, I think there's lots of people that have submitted NSF grants. So you've been on the other side of this where you have to speak to intellectual and you have to speak to broader impacts when you submit these grants. So what is intellectual merit, how it advances, and then broader impacts, how it encompasses the potential to benefit and contribute to society. So these are really very important. When we go to do reviews, they ask specifically about these two areas. They ask specifically about these two areas and whether they are addressed in the grant. Dr. Martin?
Yes.
Okay, I was just starting to talk on these, but
That's fine. That's fine. That's good. I was enjoying it.
yeah. So just pointing out that, you know, when they ask about intellectual impacts, it's very important to make this very clear in your grant because they are asking for it and credit is being given to whether you actually evaluate intellectual merits and broader impact. And I'll throw it back to you.
I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt you too. I just wanted to say that I think the internet is really, really shaky on campus. So it just kicked at least 3 or 4 of us out. So I just wanted to let you know.
Yeah, it kicked me out. Yeah, we were all kicked out.
We're all kicked out. Okay.
Yeah, we were kicked out. Yeah.
We're back now. We're good.
We're
I just wanted to let you know.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks.
So Dr. Barton, did you want to pick it up?
Yeah, so so that I think you covered it very well. So just remember, and again, this is an example. So we'll look at 2 examples. One is National Science Foundation. So the other is National Institutes of Health. So we'll look at NSF and NIH. Those are 2 of the major funders of research and basic fundamental research. And so I figured we would touch on those 2. But as Dr. Smith was saying, with NSF, their merit review criteria is based on 2 points: one, intellectual merit, the other, broader impacts. They're very strict about it. So in your project summary, your 1-page project summary, you explicitly have to identify what is the intellectual merit of your proposal and what are the broader impacts of your proposal, so of your proposed activities. So it's very important to, again, really understand that from the perspective of NSF. They have to see this. Now, in terms of what intellectual merit is, what broader impacts are, basically advanced knowledge and benefit society. That is not unique to NSF. That's just clearly spelled out explicitly by the NSF. So if you write to DOE, to DOD, to Army Research Office, to Office of Naval Research, all of those agencies are going to really want you to include in your proposal, how is knowledge being advanced? How does this benefit society? So so this concept is ubiquitous. So once you're comfortable with that, then you can apply that to pretty much all of the other funding agencies. Of course, they have their specific details, and you're going to get that when you read the solicitation. But pretty much in terms of themes in the proposal and the overarching mission that you have to accomplish is that your proposal needs to demonstrate that the activities will advance knowledge and the activities will benefit society. You have to be able to do that. And so typically I start there. If I have an idea or if I have an idea for a proposal, I ask myself, okay, can I advance knowledge? How will I advance just the knowledge of basic science or basic engineering with what I want to do? And how is this going to benefit society? Through outreach, through dissemination, through I said outreach already, but through things like that. How are you going to benefit society? With NSF, again, as Dr. Smith said, the key to remember here is that you explicitly have to use the words intellectual merit and broader impacts. You can't just say, oh, this proposal has the potential to advance knowledge in certain ways. No, it has to say the intellectual merit, bold, underline, lights, ding, 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 ding. The intellectual merit of this proposal will advance knowledge in a way that blah, 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 blah. Next section, completely different section. The broader impacts of this proposal incorporate the da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. If you do not have that, you run the risk of having your proposal returned without review. That would be one scenario. Or if it somehow gets through, if I'm reviewing it, Dr. Smith is reviewing it, that's the first thing we look for. Can we identify what the intellectual merit and broader impacts are? It literally is in the reviewer form. What is the intellectual merit? What are the broader impacts? That's a good question. So in addition, I also put this in the project description up front. So I put this in two places. I put it in the project summary where it's required. And then on the first page of the project description, I repeat what the intellectual merit of the proposed activities are and what the broader impacts are. I repeat it. And then, at that point, you've done your due diligence. You've done your duty when you've done those things. So it has to be in the project summary. Project description, they say, is optional, but optional means put it in there.
Put it in there.
Yeah, put it in there.
Absolutely. And the reviewers are very nitpicky. I can see, amazing proposals tank over not explicitly showing what the intellectual merit and broader impacts were. So
that's right.
Go to the next slide. Uh-oh. There we go.
Right. So with that in mind, so here's some questions that as a reviewer or as an evaluator, you should be thinking about. And we'll deal with this a little bit later as well. So again, bullet number 1 is the intellectual merit and are the broader impacts explicitly incorporated in the text of the project summary and the proposal? And does it come across clearly how the proposed activities will lend themselves to advancing knowledge and providing a benefit to society? The next one, and this is, I should have made this bold. Is your proposal transformative?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So if your proposed work is incremental, it will be shot down. It needs to be transformative, especially with the NSF. You may get away with some incremental work at some of the other agencies, DOE, DOD, et cetera. But you need to point out that the proposed activities by way of advancing knowledge are transformative. Number 3, do you have a plan? Is your plan well articulated? Do you know what you're going to do? You don't have to spell out, step by step, because of course it's a proposal. And as you do the work, things may come up. But do you have a framework? You have a framework for how you're going to go from what you're proposing to what you anticipate the results will be, right? Do you have a way of bridging and connecting that gap? And then also the team. Do you have the right folks on the team, on the team? And this again goes back to really reading the solicitation. I will give you an example. So my former advisor from UCLA, he wrote a proposal had something to do with, I should know how I eventually became on it, had something to do with using carbon dioxide as a precursor to make higher higher commodity chemicals and commodity molecules, even medicines. And part of the solicitation said that, well, that you need to also address legal and regulatory issues and concerns resulting from your proposed activity. And so he did not do that, and the proposal did not get funded. And so then he calls me, right? Because I'm an attorney, I'm a lawyer. He says, Leland, you're a lawyer. I'm going to put you on this proposal. And your job is to legal stuff. You just do legal stuff. That's what you do. And so by putting me on the proposal to address those issues and concerns, it strengthened the intellectual merit and the broader impacts of the proposal, and it was funded the second time around. So I guess my point there is twofold. Number one, you want to make sure you have the right team. In order to have the right team, it requires you to network. It requires you to read that solicitation very well in detail to make sure that you have all the pieces in place for you to stand a chance at being successful. Because as Dr. Smith said, they're looking for any and every reason to reject your proposal because there's a limited pool of money and there's a maximum pool of people asking for it. So they have to figure out a way, how do we cull this down? And so if you don't have a team that can perform the work that you're proposing, or if the work that you're proposing is not in line with what is being asked for in the solicitation, then you're low-hanging fruit to be culled. So make sure you have the right team. If you feel like you are the right person to be on a proposal, don't hesitate to say, hey, I can do this. I can contribute this to the team. And then I think with HBCUs, number 5 is important, and NSF is actively trying to address this. Are there adequate resources available to the PI? So we're at an HBCU. Yes, we're an R2 institution, but we don't have the same resources that University of Texas, that MIT has. So and this is another reason why it's important to be at the table. So the MIT proposal gets the benefit of the doubt on points 4 and 5. Right? They just automatically do. They see MIT and they automatically assume that the team is qualified and that the PI has the resources available to them to carry out whatever it is that they're proposing. For HBCUs on panels that I've served on, that's not necessarily the case. We don't get that benefit of the doubt. They'll go and look online and see, well, who are you? What have you done? So you want to make sure that you don't just demonstrate that you're qualified to be on the team through your CV, that the bio sketch. You want to make sure that the website, your web page is up to date. You want to make sure if I do a Google search that I can tell that you are that you're qualified in what you're proposing. So you want to do all these things because as reviewers you will do them. You'll check. I don't know who this person is, so I'll Google them. I will look them up on LinkedIn. I will go to the university webpage. And so making sure that you're able to show that you're qualified both in your proposal and also in your presence, your media presence, is going to be something that a reviewer will look at. You will, as a reviewer, you will look at it as well. And then also, unfortunately, the university also plays a role in bullet point number 5. And so, as a reviewer, when I go to reviews, I'm representing Prairie View, right? I point out certain things about a particular HBCU. If say I have a proposal and proposals from North Carolina A&T, there's certain things that I would know about North Carolina A&T, such as what is North Carolina A&T, that the other proposal reviewers may not know, right? And so I can actually speak to the broader impacts of a particular proposal and why it's important in a way that perhaps someone from UC Berkeley or Cal may not be able to do. And so, 5 is really why it's important for us to be at the table. It's one of the important reasons why we should be at the table. But as an evaluator, you're going to go through these 5 bullet points and use that to help you evaluate whether a proposal is a good proposal or whether it's a marginal proposal. You'll use these criteria, walk through them. And so what's the benefit of that? The benefit of that is when you're writing your proposal, you're going to go through these 5 items and make sure that you can check the box on all 5 once you're on a final read through of your proposal.
I would definitely agree with that. And the well qualified, so the 4 and 5 are just so critical. The comments that I've heard about certain institutions just because of hearsay, you know, and not knowing about those institutions or judging at someone's level. So who's leading this project? Is it an assistant? Is it an associate? Is it a full professor? What's the component? Like if you're trying to get something into some kind of structure adopted into like the system, the institutional system, but you have nobody that's in administration on your project. Like, what does that, how are you going to make that transition? How are you going to make the change and implement those things that you're talking about in your project, which you might do very, very well. But how do you actually have that be carried out and become transformative, as you mentioned? So you really have to be able to connect the dots and sell yourself in a way that makes some sense. I know sometimes people don't pay as much attention to the bio sketch and all of that. They just kind of throw that in there. It might be old. It doesn't really have the aligned projects that are synergistic with what's going on. But there are some reviewers out there that are really picky about that and will really say this person hasn't demonstrated why they're the best person to lead the project. So each piece of the project is really, really, really important. Yeah. Really.
That's right. You know, death by biosketch for a proposal is the worst.
It's a mess.
Yeah, it's terrible. So for reviewers and evaluators, this is what you would use to kind of guide you through your review of a particular proposal. But also, by extension, when you're writing a proposal, you're also using this as your blueprint as well, because you're writing your proposal for the reviewers, and the reviewers are using this. So you want to use this, right? So this is very important to consider at every stage of your proposal writing, because it's very important at every stage of your proposal review.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So moving on to NIH, and I picked NSF and NIH because they're so different in terms of how they run panels, but they're so similar in terms of how they assess proposals. So with NIH, they don't necessarily have merit criteria. They have what is referred to as overall impact. And the overall impact is basically a weighted score of these 5 categories. So significance, investigators, innovation, approach, and environment. And so if we go to the next slide, and we can discuss these a little bit more. So what does significance mean? So are you addressing an important problem in the field? What does that sound a lot like? Sounds like advancing knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So investigators, are you well suited to carry out the project? Sounds familiar. Innovation, that sounds familiar. Approach, do you have a strategy methodology that can carry out specific aims of the project? Environment, will the scientific environment in which work be done contribute to the probability of success? So in other words, does your university have adequate resources in order to ensure that the principal investigator will be able to carry out the work? So this is the NIH review criteria. The only difference, I would say, between the, well, we'll talk about the difference in this later, but Dr. Smith, did you want to?
So I haven't done any NIHs, so that sounds perfect to me.
Okay, awesome. So now if we take the 2 that we did, right? We take the NSF and we take NIH, and we want to compare sort of the review experiences in both.